every morning for 15 years, 5,475 mornings if you counted them all, which Thea sometimes did during the worst moments of insomnia when sleep wouldn't come despite the exhaustion. Thea woke up feeling like she'd been hollowed out from the inside, like something essential and vital had been physically scooped out of her body during the night by invisible hands, leaving behind an empty shell that looked like her on the outside but didn't feel like her. Didn't feel like anything except absence and depletion. She'd open her eyes to morning light filtering through her curtains and immediately, no. Before even trying to move her heavy limbs, before checking the clock on her nightstand, before attempting any of the small actions that made up a normal morning routine, that today would be another day of struggling through exhaustion. So profound it felt like drowning in an ocean of fatigue with no shore in sight. The dizziness would hit the absolute moment she tried to sit up, like her brain had been waiting for that first movement to unleash its daily assault. The room would spin violently, walls tilting at impossible angles that defied physics. Her stomach lurching with nausea that made her grip the sheets with white-knuckled desperation and breathe very carefully through her nose until the world stopped its nauseating rotation and settled back into something approximating stability. Her heart would be racing far too fast, far too hard, pounding against her ribs like it was trying to physically escape her chest, like it knew something was wrong and was attempting to flee. Her skin would be cold and clammy, despite the warm blankets she'd burrowed under during the night, covered in a sheen of sweat that had nothing to do with temperature regulation and everything to do with her body desperately, frantically trying to compensate for something that was fundamentally and terribly wrong with her physical state. "It's severe anemia," pack healer Marcus told her, at every single one of her monthly appointments, which she'd been attending religiously and without fail for 15 years. Never missing a single scheduled visit because she was terrified that missing even one checkup might make her condition deteriorate further. He'd review her blood work with grave expressions that looked genuinely concerned, shaking his head slowly at numbers that never improved no matter what treatments he prescribed or what lifestyle changes she implemented. "Your body doesn't produce red blood cells efficiently enough to maintain healthy hemoglobin levels. It's a genetic disorder, unfortunately quite rare in wolves, but not entirely unheard of in the medical literature. I've seen perhaps 3 cases in my 30-year career as a healer. We're doing absolutely everything we can with current medical knowledge, the high-dose iron supplements 3 times daily, the carefully planned dietary changes, emphasizing iron-rich foods, the vitamin B12 injections I give you every single week, without fail. But some cases are just resistant to treatment, no matter what interventions we try. Your body simply doesn't respond to standard protocols the way most patients do. You'll likely deal with this chronic fatigue for the rest of your life, I'm afraid." "I'm sorry, Thea. I genuinely wish I had better news to give you." And Thea would nod and accept this explanation like she'd been accepting it since she was 14 years old, since the anemia had mysteriously appeared seemingly overnight, transforming her from a healthy, energetic young wolf who ran track and played in pack competitions into someone who could barely make it through a school day without needing to rest in the nurse's office. She'd been dealing with this diagnosis for 15 years now, more than half her life spent believing her body was fundamentally defective. 15 years of being told her blood was wrong, her genetics were flawed. She'd been cursed by biology with a disorder that made normal life feel like climbing Mount Everest every single day. 15 years of everyone treating her carefully, delicately, like she was made of spun glass that might shatter if handled too roughly. 15 years of being automatically excused from pack duties to runs, the training sessions, the community work projects because she was too weak to participate without risking collapse. 15 years of watching other wolves her age live full, vibrant, active lives while she struggled with the basic existence of getting out of bed and making it through breakfast without needing to lie back down. She was 29 now and felt 60. Looked older than she should, with skin so pale it was almost translucent, with thinning hair that had lost its former thickness and luster, with a constant tremor in her hands that made fine motor tasks frustratingly difficult and embarrassing. But over the past 6 months or so, Thea had started noticing things. Small things that didn't quite add up when she thought about them carefully. Discrepancies between what she was told and what she actually experienced. Patterns that suggested something more complex than simple genetic misfortune might be happening. Like, why did her symptoms always seem significantly worse, not better? Worse on the mornings immediately following her weekly B12 injections that were supposedly helping manage her condition? Shouldn't vitamins make her feel more energized, not more drained? Marcus always had an explanation ready when she mentioned this. The injections take time to build up therapeutic levels in your system. You often feel worse before you feel better as your body adjusts to the higher B12 concentrations. But after 15 years of weekly injections, shouldn't her body have adjusted by now? And why did she wake up sometimes with small, perfectly circular bruises on the inside of her arms? Specifically, the antecubital fossa, the soft area inside the elbow where blood draws were typically performed that she absolutely didn't remember getting. She'd mentioned them to Marcus during appointments. "You bruise very easily because of the anemia," he'd explained with that patient, slightly patronizing tone doctors sometimes use. Poor circulation means even the slightest bump leaves visible marks on skin this fragile. You probably knocked your arm against something during the night and don't remember because you were asleep. Completely normal for someone with your condition. But Thea had started paying attention. Had started going to bed with completely unmarked arms and waking with fresh bruises. Had started noticing they always appeared on injection nights, never on the other 6 nights of the week. That seemed less like random bumps and more like a very specific pattern. "You're so brave," people would tell her with pitying eyes. "Dealing with this chronic condition every day? Never complaining? Always trying your best despite the limitations? It's truly inspiring." But Thea didn't feel brave. She felt exhausted, frustrated, trapped in a body that didn't work properly for reasons no one could fully explain or fix. And increasingly, over the past few months, she'd started feeling something else too. Suspicious. Like pieces didn't quite fit together. Like the official story about her anemia had holes that no one wanted to acknowledge. Like, why did her symptoms always seem worse on the mornings after her weekly B12 injections that were supposed to help? Why did she sometimes wake with small bruises on the inside of her arms that she didn't remember getting? Why did her bedroom sometimes smell faintly of antiseptic when she woke up, like medical procedures had been performed while she slept? Why did she occasionally find her sheets slightly damp, like they'd been cleaned hastily? "You're overthinking, healer," Marcus would say. Whenever she brought up these observations, "The injections take time to build up in your system. You often feel worse before you feel better. You bruise easily because of the anemia. Even minor bumps leave marks on skin with poor circulation. You probably smell antiseptic because I use it during your appointments and the scent lingers on your clothes. The damp sheets are probably night sweats from your body trying to regulate temperature with insufficient red blood cells. Everything has a medical explanation, Thea. You're just anxious about your condition, which is understandable. Maybe we should discuss anxiety medication to help you worry less." And Thea would feel foolish for questioning. Would accept that, yes, she was probably just anxious and overthinking. Would push aside her instincts that whispered something wasn't right, because trusting the medical professional treating her seemed more reasonable than suspecting some kind of conspiracy. Except it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was reality. A horrifying, systematic reality that Thea couldn't see because everyone had worked meticulously to keep her blind. Every week, healer Marcus gave Thea what he claimed was a B12 injection to help with her anemia. But the syringe didn't contain vitamins. It contained a powerful sedative mixed with a muscle relaxant strong enough to render Thea completely unconscious within minutes, unable to wake or move for the next 6 to 8 hours, no matter what happened to her body during that time. And what happened during those hours was theft. Systematic, calculated theft that had been occurring every single week for 15 years. While Thea lay unconscious in her own bed, drugged beyond the possibility of waking, healer Marcus would return to her room with equipment. 4 needles and collection bags. He'd insert the needle into her arm with practiced ease. He'd done this hundreds of times over 15 years. Knew exactly which vein to use, exactly how much blood he could take without killing her, but enough to ensure she'd wake feeling drained and weak. He'd extract approximately 2 pints of blood per week. Enough to cause the severe anemia symptoms she experienced, but not enough to be immediately life-threatening. Just enough to keep her perpetually weak, perpetually dependent on his treatments. Perpetually trusting him to help her manage a condition he was actively creating and maintaining. The blood he extracted went into special medical-grade bags designed to preserve it. Went into a refrigerated case he kept in his medical office. Went to black market buyers who paid astronomical amounts for fresh wolf blood, especially blood from young healthy wolves like Thea, who had rare bloodline traits that made her blood particularly valuable. Alpha lineage blood. Royal bloodline markers, genetic sequences that researchers and collectors would pay fortunes to access. Healer Marcus had been selling Thea's blood for 15 years, making millions from systematically draining a patient who trusted him completely, creating the very anemia he claimed to be treating, maintaining her weakness to maintain his profit source, and telling her with false sympathy that her body was defective when really he was the one destroying it week after week after week. This morning was different, though. This morning, something changed that would expose 15 years of medical exploitation and betrayal. Thea woke at her usual time, feeling the usual horrible exhaustion and dizziness. She went through her morning routine on autopilot: shower, dress and clothes loose enough to not require much effort, skip breakfast because her stomach was too unsettled. She was supposed to have her weekly appointment with healer Marcus this afternoon. He'd give her the B12 injection and she'd go home and sleep. And tomorrow she'd wake feeling even worse than today. Except when she went to her car to drive to the appointment, she found a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Plain white paper, handwritten in block letters that were clearly disguised to prevent handwriting identification. The healer is poisoning you. The injections aren't B12. Check your arm tonight. After you sleep, you'll find needle marks he doesn't tell you about. You don't have anemia. You have a predator. Thea's hands started shaking as she read the note. Her first instinct was to dismiss it as a cruel prank. Someone messing with her. Someone who didn't understand how hard she worked to manage her chronic condition. How dare they suggest healer Marcos, the person who'd been helping her for 15 years, was poisoning her? But something made her pause, made her read the note again. Check your arm tonight after you sleep. You'll find needle marks. She thought about the bruises she sometimes noticed, the small puncture marks that appeared overnight. The way healer Marcus always chose the same arm for her B12 injections, claiming it was to maintain consistency and absorption rates. What if those weren't random bruises? What if they were evidence of something else? Something she'd been too trusting to see. Thea made a decision that felt simultaneously insane and absolutely necessary. She wasn't going to her appointment today. Instead, she was going to pretend to take the injection. Pretend to go home and sleep, but actually stay awake and see what happened. See if anyone came to her room during the night. See if the anonymous note writer was telling the truth or spreading paranoid lies. She called healer Marcus's office. I need to reschedule today's appointment. I'm not feeling well, worse than usual. Can we do it tomorrow instead? There was a pause on the line. Then Marcus's voice, smooth and concerned. Thea, if you're feeling worse than usual, you should come in immediately. We might need to adjust your treatment protocol. Skipping your B12 could make things significantly worse. I really can't today. I'm sorry. Tomorrow? Okay. I just need to rest. Another pause. Longer this time. All right. Tomorrow then. But please, if you feel any worse, Call me immediately. Your condition requires consistent treatment. Missing even one injection could have consequences. The urgency in his voice should have sounded caring. Instead, it sounded worried, like he was concerned about something beyond her health, like missing one injection would disrupt something he needed to maintain. Thea hung up, feeling more suspicious than ever. She went home, made it look like she was settling in for her usual post-injection sleep, closed her curtains, turned off lights, got into bed fully clothed. But she didn't sleep. She lay there with her phone in her hand, camera app open and ready to record, waiting to see if anything would happen. Hours passed. Thea started to feel foolish. Of course, nothing was going to happen. She hadn't even had the injection. There was no reason for anyone to come to her room. The note was probably just a prank and she was wasting her time. Her bedroom door opened. Thea kept her breathing steady, her body still, her eyes closed. Through her barely slitted eyelids, she saw a figure enter her room. Tall, male, moving with familiar confidence through her space. Healer Marcus. He was in her room, in her private bedroom, hours after her missed appointment. Moving toward her bed with something in his hands that glinted in the dim light. A syringe. He had a syringe ready. Was planning to inject her anyway, even though she'd missed her appointment. Was planning to drug her in her own home without consent. Unconscionable that she skipped today, he muttered, apparently talking to himself or maybe on a phone call via earpiece. I have buyers expecting a delivery tomorrow. Can't afford to miss a week. She'd just wake up confused about how she slept through her alarm. Won't remember I was here. Thea's phone was recording everything, video and audio. Evidence of Healer Marcus breaking into her home with a syringe, admitting he couldn't afford to miss a week, mentioning buyers expecting delivery. He reached her bedside, started to reach for her arm. And Thea's wolf, dormant for so long due to what she'd thought was anemia but was actually systematic blood theft, suddenly surged forward with protective fury. Her eyes snapped open, glowing amber. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with strength she didn't know she still possessed. What are you doing in my house? Her voice came out strong despite the exhaustion. What's in that syringe? Marcus's face went through several expressions: shock, calculation, false concern. Thea, you're awake. I was worried when you didn't come in, so I stopped by to check on you. Brought your B12 injection, since you needed it. I have a key your parents gave me years ago, in case of emergency. I was just trying to help by sneaking into my bedroom while I was supposed to be asleep, by bringing a syringe to inject me without consent. Thea's grip tightened on his wrist. What's really in that syringe, Marcus? Is it actually B12? Of course it is. Thea, you're not thinking clearly. The anemia is making you paranoid. I got a note. Thea pulled out the paper with her free hand. Someone told me to check my arm after sleeping. Told me I'd find needle marks you don't tell me about. Told me you're poisoning me. So what happens if we test that syringe? What if we send it to an independent lab? Will it show B12, or will it show something else? Marcus's expression changed. The false concern melted away, revealing something calculating and cold underneath. You don't understand the situation you're in. Your blood is valuable, Thea. Extremely valuable. Royal bloodline markers that buyers pay fortunes for? I've been carefully managing your condition to maintain a steady supply without damaging you permanently. It's actually quite sophisticated medical management. You should be grateful. Grateful. Thea's voice rose. You've been stealing my blood for 15 years, making me think I had anemia, drugging me every week to keep me unconscious while you harvested me like some kind of resource. You are a resource. A very profitable one. And you were never going to use your bloodline potential anyway. You're weak. You have no ambitions. You were wasting what you were born with. I'm simply utilizing a renewable asset that would otherwise go to waste. Marcus tried to pull his wrist free, but Thea's, grip strengthened by wolf fury, held firm. Let me go and we can discuss this reasonably. I'll cut you in on the profits. 20%? That's generous. You're insane if you think I want money from selling my own blood that you've been stealing. Thea's wolf was fully present now, pressing close to the surface. You destroyed 15 years of my life, made me think I was sick, made everyone pity me as the weak wolf with chronic illness, all while you were causing the very symptoms you claimed to treat. It was just business, Thea, nothing personal. And honestly, you're better off not knowing how this works. Just take the injection, go back to sleep, and we'll forget this conversation ever happened. I'll even increase your percentage to 30. Final offer. Thea stared at him. At this person she'd trusted for 15 years. This medical professional who'd had unlimited access to her body, her home, her trust, who'd used that access to systematically drain her blood and sell it for profit while convincing her she was genetically defective. I'm calling the council, she said quietly. Right now. And you're going to stand here while I do it? And you're going to admit everything you just told me? Because I recorded all of it. Video and audio. You confessing to 15 years of blood theft? Admitting you've been drugging me? Explaining about the buyers and the profits? All of it. Marcus's face went pale. You can't. The recording won't be admissible. Maybe not in formal trial, but it'll be enough to start an investigation. Enough for them to test what's actually in that syringe. Enough for them to search your office and find the storage equipment and financial records. Enough to expose everything. Thea reached for her phone with her free hand. It's over, Marcus. 15 years of stealing from Met's over. The investigation moved quickly once Thea made the call. Council investigators arrived within hours, took Marcus into custody, seized the syringe which tested positive for powerful sedatives rather than beat. They searched his medical office and found everything: the blood storage equipment, the collection bags, the preserved samples waiting for black market delivery, the financial records showing 15 years of transactions totaling over $8 million from selling Thea's blood. But it got worse. Because Marcus hadn't been working alone. His operation required support from PAC leadership, who'd approved his treatment protocols without actually verifying what treatments he was providing. Required silence from medical staff who'd noticed discrepancies but hadn't reported them. Required cooperation from Thea's own parents who'd given Marcus the key to their house. Who'd been receiving monthly payments listed as medical expense reimbursement, but were actually hush money to keep them from questioning why their daughter never got better, despite years of treatment. You knew? Thea asked her parents during the confrontation that followed the investigation's preliminary findings. You knew he was taking my blood. Her mother couldn't meet her eyes. We didn't know exactly what he was doing. He said you were participating in a medical study. That your blood was being used for research. That you'd signed consent forms during one of your appointments when you were heavily medicated and might not remember. He was paying us for allowing the study to continue. We thought it was legitimate. For 15 years, you thought it was legitimate? For 15 years, you took money while I got sicker and sicker? While I couldn't live a normal life because I was so weak? And you never once questioned whether something was wrong. Thea's voice was shaking. I'm your daughter. You're supposed to protect me. And instead, you let someone drain my blood every week for money. We needed the money, her father said quietly, shamefully. The PAC wasn't paying well. We had debts. Marcus offered a solution. We didn't realize how much it was hurting you. You always said the treatments helped because I trusted the healer. Because I believed the anemia was real. Because no one told me I was being harvested like livestock. Thea felt tears starting. Not from sadness, from rage. From betrayal, so profound, she didn't have words for it. You sold your daughter's health for money. For 15 years. How am I supposed to forgive that? There was no answer they could give that would make it right. The trial took 4 months. Evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's financial records, the testimonies from medical staff who'd suspected something wrong but had been intimidated into silence, the blood samples found in his storage that DNA testing proved belonged to Thea, the documented symptoms of severe anemia that mysteriously improved the moment the blood theft stopped. Because within 2 weeks of the harvesting ending, 2 weeks of no sedatives, no blood theft, no systematic draining, Thea started to recover in ways that shocked even the independent medical examiner who'd been brought in to assess her condition. Her body, no longer being drained of 2 pints of blood every single week, began producing healthy red blood cells again, at rates that were actually above normal as her system frantically tried to replenish what had been stolen for 15 years. The dizziness that had been her constant companion since age 14 started to fade, episodes becoming less frequent and less severe until they disappeared entirely. The exhaustion that had made every day feel impossible began to lift like fog burning away under sunlight. Her skin regained color first, a hint of pink in her cheeks, then healthy warmth spreading throughout her complexion. Her hair, which had been thin and brittle and falling out in alarming amounts, started growing thicker, stronger, shinier than it had been even before the blood theft began. The tremor in her hands disappeared within a month. Her wolf, which had been so distant and suppressed she'd sometimes wondered if she'd lost the ability to shift entirely, became vibrantly present, again pressing close to the surface, with strength and vitality she'd forgotten were possible. By 6 weeks post-exposure, Thea could run without getting winded, could climb stairs without needing to rest, could go an entire day without collapsing from fatigue, could live a normal life for the first time in 15 years. It's remarkable and frankly horrifying. The council's independent medical examiner, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, told her during a comprehensive checkup 3 months after Marcus's arrest. Reviewing blood panels and physical assessments with expressions that cycled between professional amazement and personal outrage at what had been done to Thea. Your current blood work is completely, perfectly normal. Actually better than normal. Your red blood cell count, hemoglobin levels, iron stores, B12 levels, all of them are in the optimal range, rather than just the acceptable range. Your body is functioning exactly as a healthy 29-year-old wolf should function. There is absolutely no evidence of any genetic disorder whatsoever. No indication that you ever had true anemia beyond what was artificially created through systematic blood removal. The severe genetic anemia you were diagnosed with at 14 was entirely, completely caused by the blood theft that started the exact same week as your diagnosis. Marcus created the condition he claimed to be treating. Your body wasn't defective, Thea. You were never sick. You were being systematically drained and then gaslit into believing the depletion was your fault. Was your genetics failing you, when really it was medical exploitation of the most calculated and cruel kind? Hearing it confirmed officially by an independent medical expert that 15 years of weakness and suffering and believing she was genetically defective had been entirely preventable. Entirely manufactured by someone who was supposed to be healing her, but was instead systematically exploiting her for profit, should have been validating. Should have felt like vindication. Should have brought relief that she'd finally been proven right about her suspicions. Instead, it just made Thea furious with an anger so deep and cold it felt like it would never fully leave her system. 15 years stolen. 15 entire years of her life that should have been vibrant and full and active, marked instead by limitation and exhaustion and the constant struggle just to exist. Her entire adolescence robbed the years from 14 to 29 that should have been about discovering who she was, building relationships, pursuing dreams, living fully. All of that had been taken from her. All because someone looked at her rare bloodline and saw $signs instead of a person. Saw a resource to be exploited rather than a patient to be cared for. Marcus was sentenced to 30 years in federal imprisonment for medical exploitation, systematic assault, fraud, and trafficking in stolen biological materials. Her parents received sentences of 5 years each for their role as accomplices who'd knowingly facilitated the abuse in exchange for monthly payments. PAC leadership faced various penalties ranging from removal from positions to fines for negligent oversight. That had allowed a healer to systematically drain a patient for 15 years, without anyone questioning why she never improved, despite consistent treatment. And new protocols were established requiring independent verification of long-term treatment plans, mandatory second opinions for chronic conditions, and protected reporting channels for medical staff who suspected abuse. 6 months after the trial, Thea stood in her bedroom, the room where she'd been violated hundreds of times, where Marcus had stolen her blood while she lay unconscious and vulnerable, and felt her wolf sing with strength she'd never known she possessed. Because that was the thing about recovery. About reclaiming yourself after systematic abuse. You didn't just return to who you were before. You became something stronger. Something that had survived and refused to be defined by the violation. "How are you doing?" Dr. Sarah Chun asked during their weekly therapy sessions. She was a trauma specialist the council had assigned to help Thea process 15 years of medical abuse and family betrayal. "I know the anniversary is coming up. 1 year since you found the note. 1 year since everything changed." "I'm angry," Thea said honestly. "Still. Maybe always. 15 years is a long time to be stolen from. A lot of life I can't get back. Experiences I missed because I was too exhausted. Opportunities I couldn't take because I thought my body was defective. All of that is just gone. And that's worth being angry about. You were victimized for more than half your life. That anger is valid. But I'm also grateful, which feels weird to say. Grateful that someone cared enough to leave that note. Grateful I trusted my instincts enough to investigate. Grateful I survived it." Thea looked at her hands, steady, strong, no longer trembling. "I could have died. If Marcus had taken too much one week. If my body had finally given out. He was managing my exploitation carefully, but it was still incredibly dangerous. I could have died without ever knowing why. But you didn't die. You survived. You fought back. You exposed him. And now you're helping other wolves recognize medical abuse before it destroys them?" Dr. Chun smiled. "That's not just survival. That's resilience." Thea had started a support network 6 months ago. For wolves who'd experienced medical exploitation, there were more than anyone wanted to admit. Healers who'd abused their position of trust and authority to harm the very patients they were supposed to help. She helped them report abuse. Helped them access independent medical care. Helped them understand that being victimized by a trusted medical professional wasn't shameful, it was criminal. And the shame belonged to the abuser. Someone asked me yesterday if I missed my parents. Thea mentioned they'd been released from prison 3 months ago, but she hadn't spoken to them. Hadn't visited. Hadn't responded to their letters asking for forgiveness. If I was planning to rebuild that relationship, what did you tell them? That some betrayals are too profound to forgive? That I'm not obligated to maintain relationships with people who profited from my suffering? That forgiveness is a choice, not a requirement. Thea met Dr. Chun's eyes. Is that wrong? Should I try to forgive them? They're my parents. They're also people who allowed you to be harvested for 15 years in exchange for money, who chose profit over your well-being, who enabled your abuse. Dr. Chun's voice was gentle but firm. You don't owe forgiveness to anyone, Thea. Especially not to people who violated your trust so profoundly. If you choose to forgive someday, that's your decision. But it should be because you want to, not because you feel obligated. 2 years after finding the note, Thea was leading counsel training sessions on identifying medical exploitation, teaching healers how to recognize warning signs, teaching PAC members how to advocate for themselves when medical treatment didn't make sense, teaching young wolves that chronic exhaustion wasn't normal, that treatments should make them better, not worse, that questioning medical authority wasn't disrespectful, it was self-preservation. For 15 years, I woke up drained, she told a room full of trainees. Every single morning feeling like something had been stolen from me during the night. And something had been stolen? 2 pints of blood every week, extracted while I was unconscious, sold for profit. All while being told I had a genetic disorder and the weakness was my fault. How did you finally realize what was happening? A young healer asked. Someone left me an anonymous note. Someone who knew what Marcus was doing and couldn't stay silent anymore. That note saved my life. Made me question. Made me investigate. Made me trust my instincts that something was wrong, even though everyone told me I was just sick. Thea paused. So here's what I want you all to understand. If you see something wrong in how a colleague is treating a patient, if you notice symptoms that don't match the diagnosis, if financial records don't make sense or patients never improve despite years of treatment, speak up. Anonymously if you have to, but speak up. Because silence enables abuse. And someone out there might be waiting for that note that tells them they're not crazy, they're being exploited. 5 years after the exposure, Thea stood in a council chamber testifying in favor of legislation she'd helped draft. Requirements for independent verification of all long-term treatment protocols. Mandatory blood work analysis by multiple labs. Protected channels for reporting suspected medical abuse. Criminal penalties for healers who exploited patients. This legislation is named Thea's Law, the council representative announced. In honor of Thea Blackwood, who survived 15 years of systematic blood theft and has spent the last 5 years ensuring no other wolf suffers similar exploitation. All in favor. The vote was unanimous. Thea walked out of the council chamber, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Not just vindication, not just satisfaction, but peace. The kind that came from transforming trauma into protection. From using her suffering to prevent others from suffering. From taking 15 years of being drained and turning it into a legacy of safeguarding. 10 years after finding the note, Thea woke up feeling energized. Actually, genuinely energized. No dizziness, no exhaustion, no sense of being hollowed out. Just healthy, normal wakefulness after a full night of restorative sleep. She looked at her hands, strong and steady. Looked at her reflection, healthy color, thick hair, eyes bright with vitality. Looked at her life full of purpose and connection and the deep satisfaction of work that mattered. For 15 years she'd woken drained because a healer was extracting her blood while she slept to sell it. But she'd survived. Had exposed the abuse. Had helped dozens of others escape similar exploitation. Had changed laws to protect vulnerable wolves. Had turned victimization into advocacy. The blood that had been stolen couldn't be returned. The 15 years couldn't be reclaimed. But Thea had built something from the ruins. Had become someone stronger than the person she'd been before the theft. Had proven that surviving wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of the next chapter. And this chapter was hers. Written on her terms. Lived at full strength, undiminished by those who'd tried to drain her. She was finally, fully herself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.